Winding and Dining with Jim White. So pleased to introduce you to one of the icons of California wineries and his family, the Peter Mondavi family, certainly among the legends, and their Charles Krug winery, the oldest and certainly most respected winery in Napa Valley. Joining us now, Peter Mondavi Jr. from Charles Krug Winery. Peter, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Jim. It's great to be here.
Yeah, we had a great time together back a couple of months ago here in Dallas as you were taking your 75th anniversary master class on the road. Why don't you tell our listeners what that's all about?
Yeah, first of all, it's focused around the 75th anniversary of my family owning Charles Krug Winery. My grandparents bought it in 1943, so 2018 is 75 years. Even though the winery is much older, Charles Krug founded it in 1861. So we passed our 150th anniversary a few years ago. What we wanted to do is feature this to a select group of people, press, retailers and buyers as well around the country. So we did 3 of these master classes, one at the winery, one in Dallas, and one in New York. And we went through a number of vintages of our Vintage Select Cabernet. That's our flagship Cabernet. My family first started producing that in 1944. We didn't go that far back in the tasting, as you know, but we did dig deep and went to, the oldest we tasted was 1964. Well, and it's pretty phenomenal to go through all those vintages, all the way up to a yet to be released, of course, barrel sample of a 2016. So it was a beautiful retrospective vertical tasting of our flagship wine.
That was simply amazing. And now, of course, those were library selections from your cellar, and people may never get the opportunity to taste some of those great vintages. But talk a little bit about their different characteristics up through the years, maybe just a few high points to show really the evolution of the great Napa Valley Cabernet Sauvignons, and particularly your Charles Krug selections.
Yeah, for the most part, they've been 100% Cabernet. We did wander a little bit in the early 2000s to a little bit more blending, but still very traditional Bordeaux-style blends. So instead of 100% Cabernet, it may drop down to 92, 93% Cab with some Merlot, Cab Franc, Petit Verdot in there as well. And then back to today, now we're close to 100%, about 98% Cabernet, 2% Petit Verdot. It varies from year to year. Now, it's tough to compare a 1966 with a 2016 side by side. The older wines were just elegant. I mean, the 66 was kind of the hit of the party, kind of the consensus I got through, I don't know what your experience was, but through the 3 events we did, the 66 was kind of the hit of the party. And as I say, when you taste that wine, you have to put on, as I say it, a Pinot Noir hat or a Burgundy hat, because these wines have just, over the years, their tannins have softened into such gorgeous, elegant, like velvety texture. Fruits are very subdued in there. You gotta have to search for them a little bit. You get beautiful notes of toasty wood in there as well, some coffee cocoa tones. And again, just some subtle fruit in there. The winemaking techniques have changed a lot. The vineyards have changed a lot as well. I mean, the clones of Cabernet that we plant today, where we plant it, very, very specific, and a lot of thought goes into that. Boy, back in the 40s, 50s, 60s, you needed Cabernet, you had to plot a land, and you just stuck it in there. Today, there's a lot that goes into where Cabernet is located. And so the Cabernets of today, the Vintage Select of today, much more oak, 100% French oak. We did not see French oak until the mid-1960s here in Napa Valley, or California, or United States for that matter.
Now, Charles Krug was among the first, if not the first, to use.
Yeah, we were the second in California. Hansel and Sonoma was the first the year before. Of course, he was the ambassador to France, so he had a little heads up there.
There you go.
But we were the first in Napa Valley, second in California, perhaps the second in the United States. I can't claim that one. So today it's 100% French oak. It's all brand new oak, and that vintage stays in that barrel for about 1.5 to 2 years. So much more influence on oak. With the the clonal selection of Cabernets today, as well as the site selection, Cabernets today have more color, more tannins to them. They're bigger, bolder wines than I believe that were produced in the 40s, 50s, and 60s. Of course, I wasn't drinking much of that back then.
No.
But nevertheless, those wines of that era are just spectacular from an elegance standpoint, a complexity standpoint, and a longevity standpoint as well.
Well, it was certainly a privilege and an honor to be able to taste them with you and to be among the media that were there associated with it, and to meet other family members that you had along with you, because I know the fourth generation of Mondavi is very important to you and your brother Mark, sort of shepherding, if you will, that generation into the wine business. Give us an overview of that, please. Talk about some of the family members and their roles and how that's coming along.
Yeah, so the third generation, myself, my brother Mark, are kind of at the overall heads of the winery, the direction of the winery. Then we have the fourth generation. My wife and I have 2 kids. Mark and Janice have 4 daughters. Our 2 kids are the youngest. So I started with our youngest. She's a rising senior in college. So she has a little bit of time before she gets out and into the business.
Maybe some summer internships, things like that.
Yeah, she's been working at the winery during the summer. She's actually interning in New York for a restaurant group. Even though her major is applied math design, she loves food. She loves cooking, as it runs through the family.
Runs in the family, yes, sir.
So she's a wild card. We'll see where she ends up. But she's loving her summer in New York at the restaurant group. Moving up in age, our son, Lucho, has graduated last year with his master's. He's now pursuing his love. He's working in the automotive sector in Italy, living in Bologna, enjoying some of the finest foods of Italy at the food capital.
Driving some mighty fancy cars, too.
Yeah, and loving the wine scene there and educating himself on the wine. And so he has a strong interest in wine. Mark and Janice's 4 daughters, Angelina, now the oldest of the 6, she's the formally educated winemaker. She got her master's degree at University of Adelaide in Australia. She works locally as a consultant and has a number of brands that she consults for. And Alicia works with their family. They have a couple of very small brands that she manages. Rihanna, who you met in the Dallas event, she works for the winery, handling sales in a national capacity there, and just loving that. And then their youngest, Gigi, is in Boston working in a financial institution, but they're really all engaged in the winery at some level or another.
Well, so how long do you think, Peter, it might be before you start handing over the reins of operation? I know your father was active in the winery until the day he was no longer here on this earth.
Yeah, he was, he passed a few years ago at 101.
Yes, sir.
And he was still, he came into the office, a month or two, and the office is on the 2nd floor without an elevator. He was too frugal to put an elevator in. So he made it up the stairs there. But yeah, he was engaged up till, the last, year or so. Mark and I are not going to wait that long. But we have another good decade in us, I think.
I would certainly think so. I told you at the Dallas event, the master class, that my wife Vicki and I had the extreme pleasure of having the honor of spending some time with your dad here in Dallas. He was presented an award by the American Heart Association, the Tête de Cuvée for Côte de Cour. And then, interestingly enough, we caught up again at each other at Brother Robert's 90th birthday party in Napa at the Mondavi Winery there. And he and I, and Dan Duckhorn was with us, and your niece, and we were all singing Happy Birthday with Dave Brubeck playing the piano, and the governor of California California at that time, leading the gang and singing Happy Birthday. It was great to see the reunion of those brothers in public again.
Yeah, and I'm glad you had the experience to talk to really both of them.
Yeah.
Over the years.
It's really wonderful. But talk a little bit about those early days, some of your first memories, you and your brother Mark coming into the training and the shepherding or mentoring, if you will, that we discussed with the fourth generation, some of the experiences you and he had at your father's knee, if you will.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, when we were very little kids here, we were born and raised in Napa Valley. And in that era, Napa Valley was a very rural agricultural community. Mm-hmm. I mean, fine dining literally did not exist. And there are few restaurants. Most entertaining that was done amongst the very few vintners here were done in their homes, because there was no place to go out, for dining, unlike today. So very rural. We were engaged in doing odd stuff at the winery. My first paycheck came during a summer, of course, from school. I was 8 years old and doing just little odd jobs. And, one year, I don't know, spent much time, that was back in the days when you'd give wine glasses away when people would come to the retail room for tasting.
I remember that. It was
didn't
free.
charge back then.
Yeah.
And they would have a glass to take away. So, one year, Mark and I was like unwrapping glasses to, to hand out to people. Another year, my dad bought a whole battery of special glass line tanks, got them used from a brewery. And so we were out there sanding those all summer. We worked in the lab, we worked in the vineyard, we worked in all aspects throughout the many summers we spent here just to get exposure to the winery and see the evolution that has occurred to what it is today with just the dining scene, the wine scene. I mean, when we were kids, I think there was about a half a dozen wineries, and that was it. And we personally knew all the family members behind the wineries, and would get together on periodic basis. Now over almost 500 bricks and mortar wineries, and I don't know, 1,000 different brands. It's quite different today.
And a lot of traffic on Highway 29. There wasn't.
Yes.
I think I mentioned to you that I lived in San Francisco in 74, 5, 6, and 7, and there really wasn't much traffic in Napa Valley then, but it soon changed.
Yes, that's an unfortunate part. We do have, we're Northern California, San Francisco Bay Area, and Napa Valley suffer from traffic problems. And some years ago, it used to be weekend, and now it's throughout the week. And a few years ago, the locals would always use Silverado Trail instead of Highway 29, and now that is jammed up as Highway 29. So
maybe a monorail is the answer for Napa Valley. Let them park, in Caneros and up in Calistoga, and then they can just.
There is a train
rails.
That go from Napa to St. Helena. They actually bisect our winery. We're at the end of the line. Of course, that's the wine train. There was talk about a commuter rail, but that really didn't get off the ground, and unfortunately, because I think if the wineries jump on board, that could be useful for our workers.
That's great. Did you have a chance to know your grandparents?
My grandmother, yes.
Okay.
I was only 1 year old when my grandfather passed, but spent lots of time with my grandmother. She lived on property here at the winery. We lived in town in St. Helena. It's 2 miles away. And when we worked here during the summers, we'd always go there for this just enormous classic Italian lunch. She would take us down to Lodi, where the family first settled in California. We'd spend some time in the summer down there, watching the harvest parade. Cooked with my grandmother. So yes, spent a lot of time with my grandmother.
Was there a legend, a story, a fable that your dad told you about your grandfather in the early days of the family's operation of Charles Krug?
Well, it was something interesting about my grandfather that I heard not only from my father but other members, older members of the family. Is first of all, he was not a vintner. He was an immigrant with a partial grade school education, as was my grandmother. They came over with nothing, $20 or $30 at Ellis Island in 1908. My grandfather turned into quite an entrepreneur. He had a tremendous respect developed within the business community. But the unique thing about him was he would say very, very little. He would have a phrase or whatever, and that was the word. And people followed it. And he was also honest and good to his words. And I think that's why the banks supported him so much. The business community supported him so much. Everything was done on a handshake, and he could be absolutely trusted on that word. And that's really what I think the foundation of the family way back when. We're talking, Prohibition era.
Exactly. Well, that's the foundation of all great companies, I think. Honor and integrity.
Great integrity.
Well, let me ask you this: as Napa Valley's first winery, and here in the special 75th anniversary of the Mondavi family operating Charles Krug Winery, you've had just a host of special events. We talked about the master class. You've been involved in so many great wine festivals like Aspen, so many great things coming up. There's also, are there any of those commemorative bottles, the 2014 Magnums, left at the winery? If people want to come and see you, can they still acquire?
Yeah, there's still a few. I don't have a picture of it here or anything, but yes, it's a 2014 Vintage Select Cabernet. Mm-hmm. And we're doing a limited number of bottles. I think it's about 75 or 80 bottles of that. And it has a label that is from the 1940s era. I mean, the graphics, the design is virtually identical to some of the original labels on the Vintage Select Cabernet, and it has a little black strip indicating the 75th anniversary. But yes, there's still a few of them available at the winery. These are only winery. I don't think they're going to get out into retail or anything else.
Right. Well, I always encourage people to go to the winery, even though you all have great wine clubs. I mean, people can buy your Charles Krug selections online, where, of course, it's legal in the state you're in. But so you can't get the Magnum, but you can get a lot of other great, all the new releases. And how far can you get some library selections out of that, Peter?
There's some limited availability. I don't have the exact thing in front of me now, but there is some limited availability there. We are coming out with a commemorative 3-pack, mainly through direct-to-consumer venues. There might be some that get out to some restaurants, but a small number, and we're going back to the oldest is 1974 F1, which you also tasted at that tasting. And then there's I think something early 2000. I apologize, I don't have the exact vintages with me right now, but early 2000s, then the current release. And so it's a 3-bottle pack. So it's great there. But just a comment about visiting the winery. Of course, I love our wines, but boy, if you can get to the winery, it's the experience. It's viewing and experiencing that history here of the oldest winery in Napa Valley. I think we've done a great job of preserving that history in our hospitality center. We do have on weekends, we do pizzas. We have a wood-fired pizza oven. We have some great pizza selections here. We have charcuterie. We have some proprietary made charcuterie for us, made with our own wine. So there's a lot to do here.
A lot to do. There's so much going on in the activities. CharlesKrug.com. You can get lots of information about this. But they can even come and cook a steak with you. I think I read.
Yeah, well, that's really through the wine club. We call it a grill your own, a GYO, and we just get some of the greatest New York steaks, dry aged, USDA prime. We have a simple stone masonry grill. We put 40 pounds of mesquite in there and give everyone tongs and an apron and a little bit of salt, and off we go, and some great wine with that. And it's simple, but a great fun experience, Valley.
Just a host of activities, and I salute you for doing those. I also salute the commitment that you have shown at Charles Krug to sustainability and environmental responsibility. I was very impressed with the the array of creating your own electricity through the solar panels, and talk a little bit about that and why that's important.
Yeah, we're here in Napa Valley for generations to come. I'd like to say forever, but for generations to come.
Sure.
We have a significant footprint here in Napa Valley. Our winery sits on 150 acres here, right in just the north side of St. Helena. We have another 700 or so acres of land throughout Napa Valley. And in order to preserve this for generations to come, we have to be very sensitive to our local environment here, so we can continue this operation. So we love to preserve the local beauty here. Important one is the Napa River. Many of our properties are either adjacent to Napa River or near tributaries that feed the Napa River. So we really have to take care of that. The big thing is runoff from silt from the soil. Of course, we want to preserve that, and we want to keep it out of the river. So we do a lot of cover crop growing. So we just don't. Decades ago, we used to just till everything, and everything was just exposed dirt. Now we do a lot of planting of cover crop and manage it that way to keep the soil there. And we try to do a lot more natural things like gophers. Instead of using gopher poison, you put out owl boxes. So the owls feed on the gophers. So that
Perfect.
helps that.
Mm-hmm.
Bat boxes in the perimeter. Bats feed on a lot of the bugs, tremendous amount of bugs, in fact, and that keeps the bug population down. So we try to do natural things like that and organic-based applications when we can to really preserve the Napa Valley, the environment that we live in.
Are you pleased with the results of all of the vineyard renovation program? I know that has been completed for about 10 years, but an amazing program, over nearly $26 million spent to replace 74% of the vineyards. Is that?
Yeah, some of that money went into like the hospitality center, but much of it went into the vineyards, and it was a huge undertaking. And we're very pleased with the product because the vineyards now, because we were late in replanting our vineyards. If you go back in history, the late 80s, phylloxera came through and devastated many vineyards in Napa Valley and forced them to replant on very short notice. However, my father, when he planted rootstock, he planted St. George rootstock, which is a very old, traditional, tried and true rootstock, whereas the other vineyards, pre-1980s, were planted on more contemporary rootstock, which turned out to be susceptible to phylloxera. So in 1980s, a lot of vineyards were wiped out. However, Dad's vineyards, our vineyards on St. George, were resistant to that the phylloxera. So we didn't have to replant until a number of years later, when old age set in and just the due course of a natural vineyard. We learned from the things that the other vintners did when they planted. We learned what to do right, what to do wrong. Most importantly, we got access to great clonal selections of Cabernet, some of which were coming from Europe, and it takes some time. So we were very fortunate in our timing there, and we love the results, and I think the wines speak for themselves. In fact, we have one interesting wine, a DTC wine only. It's called 10 Clone, It's literally a blend of the 10 different clones of Cabernet that we have planted in our vineyards.
Ah,
It's
delightful.
kind of an homage to that clonal selection.
Another reason to join the wine club, thus the DTC that Peter mentioned, direct to consumer. So that's delightful. Let me ask you this: weather patterns this year, are you on track for a September harvest, or what are you thinking?
We're probably on track to a week or so later than a long-term average date. Reason being was we had a fairly cool spring, and it delayed the well, the vines wakening up and stuff.
Okay.
So we got delayed at the very, very front end, and the weather since then has been pretty nice. We're perhaps on the actually warmer than we'd like right now. We're in the low 90s for the highs, which is fine. I mean, high 80s probably be better. You know, we may have had a day or two of 100 degrees, but the weather right now is looking very nice. No frost, so no suffering from frost damage this year, which is great. This set was very good. That's when the flowers pollinate. Weather is good. It's set in a fairly tight time frame, which is great. Veraison is just starting. We're starting to see some coloring of the hard green berries turning to, at least for the red fruit, turning to the black, dark colored. So we're starting to see that. So things are on par for a great harvest. You know, quality, I don't know, things are looking good, but it's hard to tell until we get the fruit in there. So yeah, that's kind of a quick update. And
Very interesting.
quantity wise, we're about average, maybe a little bit over average quantity wise. So it's not going to be a short crop or a bumper crop or anything like that. So that bodes very well for the quality as well.
Indeed. Well, I will once again suggest to you that if you have a chance, be in Napa Valley for the blessing of the grapes around harvest time, and to visit Charles Krug Winery. And charleskrug.com has all the details on that. And Peter, thank you. I want to tell you how much I appreciate your taking time out of your busy schedule. Please give my best to the family members that I've had the pleasure of meeting, and I certainly hope to meet more. We hope to come and see you in Napa Valley.
Jim, you're always welcome, and all of your listeners as well. Thank you.
Thank you for being with us, and thank you for joining us, Peter Mondavi Jr. on Wining and Dining with Jim White. Well, that was nice. That was fun. Thank you for being so open and congenial and sharing thoughts about your family.